G'day guys, my name's Nick and this is Nutrition. Today's video is a recording of a talk I was a part of at a conference earlier this year. The talk is titled Nutrition Approaches for Weight Loss During the Menstrual Cycle. I was joined for this talk by some amazing coaches and the details for them will be in the description below. This is a pretty long one, but it's also probably one of the most valuable videos I've uploaded for women specifically or for anyone coaching women. So with that out of the way, here's a video.
So, Nick, good morning. How are you?
Morning, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good. Let's bring in Emilia by the powers of technology. Emilia's here. Hello, Emilia. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very tired, but we are set for another 13 hours of doing live stuff, so that should keep you awake. Well, it has to. Otherwise, this will be rubbish. Cool. So we are talking all about nutrition approaches for weight loss during the menstrual cycle. And Jayne will be joining us in a second. I'm going to keep her out on my phone just in case she's having some issues with the technology. And I will figure that bit out as we go. Oh, here she is. In fact, I would say speak of the devil, but that would be quite harsh. Here comes Jayne. Jayne is arriving. Jayne is there. Hello, Jayne. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Sorry, turn the phone up there.
Yeah, very good. Cool. So let's get started. As I said, we can ask questions as we go. What could be better than this? That is right, John. So we've got people joining us from all over the world, California, all over. So let's get started. Emilia, you're going to be first up. So hopefully you're ready for early morning questions on a Sunday. This is not how I spend my Sunday. I am usually still in bed at this point. So this is breaking new ground for me. So let's start off by talking about what are some of the common issues, challenges that women face with regard to weight loss in context of the menstrual cycle.
Sure. I would just want to say morning. And also I'm the same. I'm not usually up at this time. So I sacrificed my breakfast this morning because Simon told me that I had to shower for this. So I haven't actually eaten yet because he told me that was the priority. So if my brain goes off on one, it's because I'm hungry. So I think what would be really useful is to kind of talk through actually the fluctuations that we get in our hormones across the menstrual cycle first. For the rest of this conversation, I think it's really useful to have that as a reference point. So the average menstrual cycle roughly lasts 28 days, slightly more, slightly less for some people. And we can break that down into two kind of key phases of the menstrual cycle. We have the follicular phase, which is the first 2 weeks. And during that phase, we are estrogen dominant. And then we have the second 2 weeks of that, which is the luteal phase, in which progesterone is dominant. And what all four of us will be talking about today are responses to those hormonal fluctuations. So we have that follicular phase followed by the luteal phase. And it does pose some problems for women. But what I think is really important is to kind of reframe it in the sense of they're completely normal. And actually they can be used to our advantage. Periods are not a negative thing and they're not detrimental to our fat loss, but they can pose specific problems that if we work around them, they can actually support us in our goals. And I think that's a really important initial reframing for everyone to do. So what we tend to get, and the most obvious fluctuation that comes across the cycle that does seem to impact fat loss is potentially for some individuals, we get a shift in hunger. And our appetite tends to increase in the luteal phase, specifically in the week before our period. So you'll hear people say all the time, like I was insatiable or I was craving really bad or I couldn't stop eating. And although this response is really individual, and if you look at the research, some people don't experience this shift at all. For some people, they do get a slight increase in metabolic rate. And that happens roughly for most women, but not all women are in tune with that. And the basal metabolic rate can increase by about roughly 8 to 15%. So if you look at that in terms of calories, that's probably about 100 to 200 calories each day. Individuals might find an increase in their basal metabolic rate. And so there is a rationale and there is a justification for people saying that they are completely insatiable that week before their period. 200 calories doesn't sound like a lot. And actually, when you tell people that it's a BMR increase of about 200 calories, they think that it's massively underplayed. But that is realistically the increase that we're looking at. If you've got individuals who are not tracking, what you actually tend to find is that naturally people who are very intuitive with their eating, you will see that they will naturally increase their calorie intake during that time anyway. And so it's not a problem if you are somebody who trusts your hunger and are in tune with your hunger. It's actually not really an issue. The issue tends to come from individuals who are tracking or are dieting, and they don't rationalize that hunger. And I know that we're going to be talking about that, and I think Nick's going to be talking about it on the next question, so I'm not going to wade in on that. But we do get this increase in hunger, so that's kind of the first potential problem for people. Alongside that, estrogen and progesterone, the ratio of them impacts how well we recover from training and our strength in the gym. And actually, during the luteal phase, so that again, that 2 weeks before our period begins, we can find that we are weaker, we have lower motivation to train, we have less energy, and we recover less efficiently from training. Again, this is really, really individual, and some people don't experience this at all. So we've got the increase in appetite, we've got a reduction in potential for desire to train and potential recovery from training. And then at the same time, we also have, for some of us at least, we get a little bit psychologically challenged during that time. And to put it nicely, some of us can really suffer with mood swings, and PMS is a legitimate concept, and we get an increase in anxiety, low mood, we have lower energy levels, and we also, with the increase in progesterone, we also get hotter. And so we're hot, sweaty, mad, hungry, and then we're trying to also drop fat at the same time. So it can be really, really difficult. And then you've also got the issue of, if you are very emotional, you have an increased risk of emotional eating. And that alone is a huge issue for people. And so actually, one of the best things you can do is just to rationalize that you will be hungrier, you will be more emotional, and really listen to your internal cues and figure out, do I just want to knock his head off, or am I genuinely hungry? And kind of identifying the differences between those two can be really, really helpful in that time. So yeah, periods of the menstrual cycle on the whole can kind of, we've got the threefold potential impact of it in terms of mood, training, and hunger. So it's about managing all three of those together so that you can actually use it almost as an ergogenic aid rather than a detriment to fat loss.
Good stuff. So I had one question. Obviously, you, from a coaching perspective, coach many different women, all different experiences when it comes to maybe their understanding of nutrition, and also, as you mentioned, in terms of the menstrual cycle itself, very, very individual. What do you feel like when someone comes to work with you? What's the general level of understanding about something that is one of the most natural things in the world, about people's understanding of what actually is happening and what is actually the different changes that they're going through each month? What's their general understanding of that?
That's a really, really good question, because what I find, and I don't know if the other two will agree or all three of you will agree, is that there is quite a bit of misinformation within the health and the fitness space, whereby it is very overplayed a lot as some sort of business model for individuals, that women need to have really be treated in a completely separate way, and it's a huge impact on fat loss and potentially muscle building, etc. And so when people come to me, they either have it overhyped in their head, and they say, you know what, that week before my period, I can't sleep, I can't eat, and I hate myself. And actually a lot of that is kind of compounded by the messages in the media and in magazines, etc. So there does seem to be, it tends to be, people are a lot more aware of it now, but I actually think potentially it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy for some individuals who are constantly bombarded on Instagram every single day that if you are in your luteal phase, you won't be able to stop eating and you'll find training really hard. And I actually think that can be quite detrimental to people's knowledge, because they then kind of just fall into that, like I said, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And actually they may be somebody that doesn't experience these fluctuations, but because they've been exposed to this in the media, they then sort of assume that they will, and that impacts them in that way. So I do think knowledge is improving around the area.
Cool. And so talking of sort of coaching, Nick, we'll kind of come on to you to sort of expand on that and maybe go into a little bit more detail. So Emilia touched on some of the issues, challenges, whatever you want to call it, in terms of the menstrual cycle and how it naturally changes, and it's all perfectly normal. Obviously, there are specific challenges that come with that, though. So in terms of people that you've worked with, clients that you've worked with, in terms of adapting their nutrition protocol to manage those elevated levels of hunger, increased feelings of cravings and things like that, what are some of the things that you've done with specific individuals, let's say, to try and overcome those challenges? Clearly a triangle. Nick, are you there?
There we go. All right. For some reason, my button got stuck. Right. So I was looking for a graphic to help me explain this. And I thought this one here was the first one that came up, funnily enough. And it actually had a lot to do with what Emilia was just talking about. And it's obviously not real. It's a bit of a joke. But I'm sure we've all experienced those. But the one I was actually looking for was this one here. So this is a more visual demonstration of representation of what Emilia was just talking about with the cycles and the way it all works. And she's completely right that it's super individual. Some women will experience it, some women won't experience it. And from a coaching point of view, you got to realize that it's not like the old school way was you treat women like small men, and then they kind of learned that that's not the case. And then it was treat women like women. And then now people are finally realizing that you treat women the same as you treat men. Everyone's an individual, and they're all going to be different. And you can't just take something you use for one person, use it for another person. It's not always going to work that way. So to answer the question properly, usually if I have the time with the person, I will collect data before we start making too many big changes. So we might not even give the person calories to hit. We might just get them recording their body weight and their food intake, and just see what the correlations are between their body weight and their food intake and the day of their cycle, and which phase they're in, and see if they're already naturally getting hungrier, eating more, actually do notice some noticeable weight gain. And then if necessary, we look at things like, so if they are getting hungrier in that week before the period, which is usually when they have the hunger, what I usually do is start to increase calories, and we just go by a little bit. Some people, even mentally knowing that they have an increase in calories, might be enough. I tend to, if I want to err on the side of caution and I want people to be able to adhere to the calories I'm giving them, I will tend to go kind of lower than normal on the other 3 weeks. And on the week where they're hungrier, I will just bump them up to calculated maintenance, which will still likely be in a deficit anyway. And then every month I would recalculate maintenance. So if they're losing weight, I wouldn't just keep going back to the maintenance they were on at the start. I would keep recalculating maintenance based on the body weight they were before that initial weight gain before the period, because we know that's water, it's not active tissue, and just take advantage of the fact that their maintenance is going to be a little bit higher anyway. So by going to calculated maintenance, there's probably still going to be a slight deficit there. But generally, I find that even a slight increase in calories, even if it's not all the way to maintenance, does the trick. And some people, if they're comp prepping or something like that, and they're really desperate to keep losing weight and they don't want to go to maintenance, you can look at all the stuff that they were talking about in the weight loss roundtable yesterday, where higher residue foods, higher fiber, higher protein, all these things to make you feel fuller without actually increasing the calories. But the fact is that there is a higher energy demand in a lot of people, and the way to combat the cravings that can come with that, because it's not just they need the energy, it's also that they have the hormone changes that actually create cravings for certain types of foods, is to actually raise calories and not just simulate a raise in calories by increasing satiety.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to build on what you said there, and also I think some of the things that we touched on yesterday about individualizing approaches is so important, and understanding that person and understanding how their body reacts to certain things and how their emotions react to certain things is important, and being able to adapt to that as a coach is important. And just to give you a little bit of an example, I'm working with a client right now, and part of it is education. So for example, man or woman, regardless of menstrual cycle or not, I think that there is still very much an emotional attachment to scale weight. So guys aren't immune to that either. And therefore giving someone education on what is happening physiologically with their body when they jump on the scales versus what they ate yesterday, and all the sorts of factors that go into changes in scale weight fluctuation is hugely important, because that gives them an understanding of what's going on. Then providing some additional education for females around the menstrual cycle, around those hormone changes that yourself and Emilia have spoken about, again, starts to build that knowledge. And when I'm then working with a client and we're saying, right, okay, we know this is happening, we can kind of almost now, if we've got some understanding of what's happening with your specific body, we can almost map out how your feelings are going to change, how your weight's going to change. And we now go into each and every day and each and every week really from a position of empowered knowledge, and not necessarily all this like reactive kind of emotional side of things of, oh my God, I've put on some weight, and helping people to understand what process they're likely to go through over the course of a 28-day or whatever it turns out to be time is hugely important. So I think that's good. Emilia,
am I allowed to jump in?
You can jump in whenever you like.
One thing I just wanted to add on that, something that my clients on that point, it's such a good point, Simon, on that kind of rationalizing of these fluctuations. A lot of my clients will use an app like Natural Cycles or various other apps that actually allow you to track your basal temperature in the morning, all of your PMS symptoms. You can add your weight in there if you want. So actually what they can see over time is like this trend. So I know that, so I do it myself. I know that on a certain day of the month, every month, my note for that day is insatiable hunger. And I think that, like you said, is really empowering for people to then look back at that and go, oh, I feel this way every single month. That's completely normal. And it stops them feeling kind of questioning themselves and then going into more potentially disruptive behaviors. The other thing I wanted to add on that is that this is kind of a little bit off topic, but in terms of how your nutrition can be impacted, and one thing that you can do, and I'm probably going to be talking about this all day, is actually there's some research around mindfulness and PMS symptoms and how that can actually impact nutrition. And actually, if you look, there's not a lot of research specifically on PMS. A lot of it is around anxiety and low mood, but the mindfulness-based stress reduction program is an 8-week mindfulness program that's based on mindfulness meditation, gratitude, self-compassion, and incorporating these all together. And actually, the research suggests that doing the mindfulness-based stress reduction program can reduce overall PMS symptoms. And so actually that means irritability, low mood, etc. And if we look back at how our emotional fluctuation impacts our nutrition, actually if we can manage that through mindfulness and other emotional regulation behaviors, we can then subsequently impact the nutritional choices that we make. So alongside of the nutrition side of it, we can look at the mindfulness behaviors and our gratitude and our compassion and try and kind of interrelate them all together in terms of then how that then manifests in our nutritional choices.
Mm-hmm. So a quick question was, what app was that? Maybe the Scottish accent far too quick.
That was Natural Cycles, but I think Clue, is another one. But there are quite a few. Natural Cycles is the one that I use.
Natural Cycles. There we go. So next question, Emilia, we were going to touch on this subject anyway, but it's coming live. So I think quite important for this person to get an answer ASAP, because there we go, you'll see. So this is, I think, from Louise, who said, I've been dieting for a year now and have lost my period completely. I've been told this is normal, but what is the consequence of this?
Okay. I would be interested to firstly know actually who said that was normal. And I think that potentially might be a little bit of miscommunication or misunderstanding. So your period may well be lost with excessive chronic dieting, but it's not something that should be normalized, and it's not something that should be accepted as a normal byproduct of healthy dieting. It isn't. So it is something that you need to look at. What you're referring to is this concept called hypothalamic amenorrhea. And that basically means a loss of the menstrual cycle as a result of, there are a number of different things that can cause it. Usually, and in your situation, it's most likely to do with chronic energy restriction and what we call a low energy availability. And what energy availability really is a term that's used to describe the amount of energy that you have left after you've done your exercise to perform basic physiological functions, like you're having your period, for example. And what happens when you diet is that you chronically take in a low amount of energy, and you potentially have an increased expenditure. So your energy balance is chronically low, and you have chronically low energy availability. And after a while, and once you hit a certain threshold, your body then starts to preserve its physiological functions that are mandatory, and things like your period stop because it uses energy that your body doesn't have. So, like I said, it can be caused from a chronically low energy availability, but it can also be a result of psychological stress. And remember, dieting for some of us is really stressful in and of itself. But then if you've got anything else going on, for potential examples would be isolation, working at home, all the situation that we're in right now, a lot of us are under a lot of additional stress. And then there's also a genetic component as well. So what you might find is that some people actually lose their period with dieting, not too excessively, but then actually other people can get to, say, competition, if you're looking at bodybuilding, for example, competition lean, and still have their period. And that is predominantly due to the genetic component of that. So we've got those three potential factors that will impact your menstrual cycle and whether you develop hypothalamic amenorrhea. It does happen. So I think that's what you mean when you say it's normal, and that it can be expected to happen in people who are chronically restricted, and that's probably what you mean. But what this means, if you don't have your period, is that the signals from the hypothalamus in your brain are getting mixed up, and it's not producing the right signals that allows you to produce a mature egg and to ovulate. You don't get the surges in what we call luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, and they're both required for egg maturation and release. And so because these signals are not coming from your hypothalamus in your brain, you're not getting these surges in hormones, and then you're not getting ovulation. And a lot of people kind of think, well, that's okay, I don't mind not having a period, and it's quite handy for me, and I don't want to have babies anyway, so really what does it matter? But actually, it's so important. Your period is so important for so many other metabolic factors in your overall health. Estrogen is important in terms of your bone health. And so if you have chronically low estrogen, which you do when you have hypothalamic amenorrhea, you've got this hypoestrogen state, you are at an increased risk of bone loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis, bone fractures. You also will see evidence of it in your skin, in your hair. And longer term, actually, it can impact your cognitive function, your risk of cardiovascular disease. There are so many other impacts from having HA other than just you don't have your period. So it's really, really, really important that you start to work on getting it back. And that is much more important right now for you than your body fat and your body composition.
100%.
Do you mind if I jump in as well?
You go for it, Nick?
Yeah. So an easy way to think about the losing parts of your period, because it's not always you lose the whole thing. You might have spotting or something like that. Is if you look at the graph that I put up before, your estrogen kind of creates the period, and then your progesterone kind of holds it in. So if you don't have enough estrogen, so from this chronic energy unavailability or low energy availability, you can't create the period. So that's why you lose it. There's nothing there. Even if you have enough progesterone to hold it in and then release it, there's nothing to release. Whereas if it was the other way around, for example, if you have another imbalance in your hormones and your progesterone is actually not enough and your estrogen is enough, you'll still create the period, but you won't have a structured 28-day cycle or close to 28 days, whatever it is for you normally. And you might not even have like one roughly week of bleeding. You might have, it could be over 14 days. It could be, constant throughout the month. It could be, twice a month you might have a period. So there's clues there in what's happening to you, and it's worth noting how your period changes if it does, because it might not be straight away you lost it. There might be other changes happening that you kind of need to take note of, and it's really important
that women are aware of their cycle and aware of the changes that are happening with it for this exact reason.
And just sort of maybe just to build on what Emilia was saying there was, so in terms of actually, you mentioned like chronically low calories and energy availability. So is one of the simple answers is you just need to increase calories as maybe a first point of call as a immediate sort of corrective action is to, you may be very, very low in calories. So you need to increase that. Is that one thing that potentially is the first port of call?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that you should be doing. The most important thing really at that point is to speak to your doctor, because actually, and I saw something in the comments about this, which was a really great point, is that often hypothalamic amenorrhea can be misdiagnosed as PCOS and vice versa. And actually both HA and PCOS have a greater incidence in the athletic population and people who exercise more regularly. So it's really important to get any other underlying potential health implications ruled out by your doctor. And also your doctor might look at your relationship with food and potential any sort of disordered eating or eating habits within that, and will refer you appropriately, whether it's for CBT or other tests. So that's the first most important thing to do. And then, yes, realistically, you want to look at the things that you can control. So obviously you can't control your genetics, but you can control your energy availability and you can control your stress levels to some extent. And so it's really looking at, again, this kind of threefold approach in the sense of increasing your calorie intake. And I know that can be really daunting. And so if you struggle with that, it is really worth doing it with the help of somebody else, so you have that accountability. Reducing your energy expenditure. Specifically, you should be looking at your high intensity exercise. You shouldn't really be doing a lot of high intensity exercise training at this point, because not only does that increase your expenditure, but it also increases your release of stress hormones, which can impact your release of specific hormones required for menstruation. So removing really high intensity exercise is really important. Increasing your calorie intake, and there is no set amount of calories that you should be consuming because it is very specific to the individual. And if you look at the research, this can range quite greatly, but there are some people that suggest that your minimum calorie intake should be 2,500 calories to begin with in order to restore your menstrual cycle. And there are some people that suggest that you should completely remove exercise. Now, I'm not one of those people that says you should completely remove exercise unless it's a specific situation. It's very, very individual, like Nick said multiple times. But actually, for some people, removing exercise completely can be additional stress, and we don't want to add additional stress. So looking at your overall volume of training and reducing that somewhat. You shouldn't be doing things like additional steps just to hit your step count, for example, additional cardio, that type of thing can come out. But if you want to, say, maintain low volume weight training, but enough to still see progression in your strength, then that's something you can do. But it is very, very individual, and it's very important that the easiest and the most important thing you can do is, at least on paper, is to bring your calories up. And specifically from carbohydrates and fats, because those tend to be the ones that are chronically under-eating when people are dieting.
Cool. Right. Okay, cool. So we've got lots of live questions coming in about period loss. So what I'm going to do is park those questions for a little bit, and then going to come back to that, and we'll do a bit of a chunk on that and rattle through those questions. So if you've got questions about that sort of side of things, keep them coming in. We will get to them. What I want to do is, Emilia just touched on training there in terms of how you would maybe adjust it to for a situation where you have lost your period, but we're going to come to Jayne and talk about hello Jayne, about training in general. So not necessarily specific to period loss, but how you might approach training if you are, trying to lose weight, your menstrual cycle, and how you might look at adapting, or even if you should adapt. So Jayne, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so training at all stages of your menstrual cycle can be a positive thing. But like the guys have touched on already, an understanding of your cycle is going to really help you manage your expectations of yourself throughout it. It's going to help you adapt your programming to suit it, because the type of training that will work best for you throughout your cycle can change and can shift. So yeah, tracking your cycle, understanding it, understanding how you feel is really important, I think, for everybody. So like throughout your cycle, when you're thinking of the follicular phase, so that's when estrogen peaks. And that's like the start of your period. So after like PMS has kind of passed, estrogen peaks, your energy levels go up. This is when you can kind of feel like She-Ra in training is probably the best way I can describe it. Like you're feeling higher energy, you can handle more intensity. If you're like someone who lifts, that might be a time where, you know, you might go for your max lifts, and that's in the first 14 days. So that's when you're feeling at your best and when intensity can ramp up. It's also when, if you are prioritizing muscle gain, your kind of adaptations are going to be at their best as well. So yeah, in the first 14 days of your period is when, if you have programming for a coach, would be when you can handle more intensity. Your energy levels are going to be up and you're going to feel stronger, you're going to feel fitter. Then when you start moving into the luteal phase, which is the dreaded phase where PMS can kick in if you suffer with it, not everyone's the same. And when that kicks in, that's like the lining of your womb starts to thicken, get you ready for pregnancy, your temperature rises. You know, if you are someone who suffers with water retention, this is when that's going to start happening. Your energy levels can sink a little bit, feel a bit lethargic. I know some people, I know myself, I definitely do. I get clumsier. I think other people do a little bit as well. So high skill movements might not be the best at that time. And also your serotonin levels drop a little bit as well. So this is when, I think Emilia touched on this earlier, you know, you can get crankier, you can feel like really blue if you struggle in that way. And so around the time of your luteal phase, that's when you should probably think about lowering the intensity, managing your expectations of yourself, trying to push yourself crazy with something high intensity, or having expectations of yourself to be able to, you know, Olympic lift or do something really high skill or go for your max lifts at this time isn't optimal. It's like physically and psychologically probably going to impact you, because you're going to get mad at yourself that you're not feeling great, that you might be a little clumsier, that it might feel a little harder. So this is a good time probably for the more aerobic work, even resting off a little bit more, sleeping a bit more, listening to your body, you know, yoga, swimming, really lower the intensity. And it's like, this is one of the reasons why I like touching on with period loss and that as well. It can, not having your period is not a positive thing for training. Like, it's not something that is going to help you. It's like, it's not around, so I'm not going to feel like crap. I'm not going to have the luteal phase. It's actually going to impact you massively in being capable of the adaptations of getting stronger, gaining muscle, things like that. So it's a negative impact on your training side of things as well. I think it is really important just, track your cycle, understand it, have a coach that understands it if you're someone who's in competitive sport or wanting to be able to get the best out of you physically and psychologically throughout your cycle is really, really important. And manage your expectations of yourself. When you're feeling low energy, feeling a bit crappy, like, rein it back, listen to your body, you know, don't have these high expectations going into the gym that you're going to be able to like kill it all the time. You know, you need to make sure you take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Emilia looked like she wanted to say something there. Sorry.
Yeah, I think everyone did. That's why I kept my mouth shut, because I didn't want to speak to anyone. I was just nodding on to Jayne really enthusiastically the whole way through that. So yeah, like exactly what Jayne said. But again, back to what Nick was saying, is that it's so individual, and that not everyone will experience that. It is individual. So again, you don't want to fall into that self-fulfilling prophecy of, I'm going into the gym and I know that I'm going to be weak today, because then that will manifest in your strength in the gym. So it's like Jayne said, when you log it, you'll know for yourself if that impacts you, but it doesn't happen to everyone. And so it's not some sort of like novelty that you can say, well, that happens to me, therefore I'm going to get weaker. And I think it's really important to know that. There is actually some evidence that there are quite a few studies actually that have looked at front-loading training. So actually increasing the volume of training in the first 2 weeks in the follicular phase, so the first 2 weeks of your cycle, and then reducing training in the second 2 weeks. And it does look like it may well support increases in lean muscle mass, strength, and power for some individuals. And that can look in practical terms like potentially, as Jayne said, like maybe auto-regulating your deload so that you maybe have a week off or a really low intensity week during your luteal phase. And at the same time, you could potentially look at increasing your volume in the first 2 weeks. So you might add an extra session during the week. So maybe for the follicular phase, the first 2 weeks, you do 5 or 6 training sessions, say, on the extreme end. But then actually during your luteal phase, you might only do 3 for those 2 weeks each week. And that's a really practical way, or you can just increase sets and reps in the gym for those first 2 weeks. And that's a really practical way to take advantage of your estrogen dominance at the start, and then just give yourself that kind of practical rest later. And like I said, there is some evidence to support that in some individuals. It's, like I said, it's not across the board.
I have one sort of question, whoever wants to jump in and answer it, but obviously one of the tenets of building muscle and things like that is progressive overload, which kind of then puts into the mindset of people that not every session, but certainly consistently, you're looking for progressions. So is it the case that, you know, a lot of women will come into the gym and in their mindset will be expecting, I'm going to progress on this lift, I'm going to be able to do one more repetition, I'm going to be able to move forward? How do you kind of manage those emotions around not letting them, or not kind of having that self-fulfilling prophecy of going in and saying, oh, I'm going to be weak today, so it doesn't really matter if I don't really push that hard, versus, okay, well, even if I do push as hard as I possibly can, I still might not make progress because of all of these things. How do you kind of approach that kind of juxtaposition, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really good question. I think the most important thing is taking it day by day and removing all expectation whatsoever. Knowing that you might work with reps in reserve, you might work with RPE, you might not work with either, but you know that when you go into the gym that you are going into the gym to give it everything that you can on that day. Then you don't try not to focus on what is, like I said, your expected results. So whether you expect to increase or expect to decrease, because you can look back retrospectively and rationalize, which you would be doing with a coach, for example, anyway, where you review your progress week to week, month to month, etc. So looking back retrospectively is helpful, but taking each day as it comes when you go in the gym, and that comes down as well to that mindset around it, comes down to a lot to self-compassion and that realization that we all go, well, at least half of the population go through periods in this cycle. So it's completely normal to feel weaker, and it's completely normal to have these kind of, to go through these emotions, but just to take a step back and say, like, this is expected, this is okay, and just allow it rather than beat yourself up. If you know that you're going in every day and giving it your all, that's actually what matters. And looking at progress over time. So rather than looking at it day to day, looking at each month, what's happening with your volume overall, you'll see that there'll be an up and down squiggle like there is for every type of progress, but ultimately there should still be a net positive and a net increase.
Cool. Awesome. So some comments coming. Best talk ever. There you go. Let's make your Sunday morning worthwhile. Cool. So I'm going to come to Jayne again for one more question that we've got kind of pre-prepared, and then I know we've got a raft of questions in the live, so we'll then start drilling through all of those. So be patient, and if you've got questions, keep firing them in. We will get to them. So Jayne, just before we do that, then let's kind of have a little bit of completeness on this sort of topic. So in terms of supplements, sort of an interesting topic. In terms of anything that's got some credible evidence, something that maybe women should consider about managing various different aspects of the menstrual cycle, are there anything that should be considered?
Yes, there are there's several supplements that have some credible evidence behind them to support a healthy menstrual cycle. Starting off though, it's like you are going to have a healthy, balanced diet. Make sure that you're getting lots of variety, optimizing your protein levels, things like that are really important as well. But when it comes to actual supplements, the ones that do have some evidence will be omega-3, which has some positive associations. So you're looking at either increasing oily fish in your diet or supplementing with fish oil, or if you're vegan, supplementing with algae, and you would target 1 gram of combined EPA and DHA, which are the active ingredients in omega-3, per day. And that's particularly if you're not eating oily fish, that's going to be the best dose to cover. It well covers the recommendations for PMS, but it also will cover health reasons as well. Omega-3 is beneficial for general health. And then vitamin D3, deficiencies in vitamin D3 is associated with PMS as well. And currently, I think everybody's probably already considering supplementing with D3. There's a lot of positive health benefits to it. So we don't get a lot of sunshine here in Ireland or over there in the UK. So it's always a good idea, I think, to particularly through October to March, to be taking your vitamin D3. Calcium has also got some positive evidence behind it. Now you can optimize your calcium through your diet. If you make sure you're going to get about, your target would be about 1,200 milligrams. And you're going to try and get that, if you're eating it and you're like getting it through diet, things like dairy, fortified foods, figs, sardines even have quite a lot of calcium in it, or like your leafy greens. But if you're not eating all of those foods, then yeah, you can supplement with some calcium as well. As well as that, there's my favorite one. That's my savior. I think Emilia takes this one as well. And that is chaseberry. And chaseberry, or Vitex it's known as, and it is a herbal supplement with some credible evidence behind it to support PMS. It is, you would take about 400 to 500 milligrams a day, I think is the therapeutic dose. It's one, I order mine online, and I recommend to a lot of clients that they do the same, because I know here in Ireland anyway, it's difficult to find in health food stores and stuff. Don't see it around a lot. So sometimes it's better to get it online. It might be different in the UK, you may have better access to it. But the theory behind it is it regulates your prolactin levels and your progesterone, and it helps alleviate some of the symptoms of PMS. And even anecdotally, you see a lot of people talking about it, that it really does help them with their symptoms. I know from myself personally, in my own experience, that it was a savior. Like about 4 to 5 years ago, I started taking it, and it was a game changer with my own PMS, which was pretty severe, and it really helped with mood, with headaches for me. So it's definitely one that I highly recommend people consider. There would be, I would say, if somebody is considering getting pregnant or is lactating, breastfeeding, that they talk to their doctor before they think about taking it, because it does impact prolactin, which is a hormone that is involved in the production of breast milk. So there is a consideration there. So if you are concerned in any way about that, I would consult with your specialist before you take it. There is also, if you suffer with really heavy periods, potentially discuss with your doctor checking your iron levels and your vitamin B levels, particularly if you don't have a lot of food in your diet that would optimize those. Someone who has quite heavy periods may end up with, could end up having some issues there. So it's good to keep an eye on that. If you're getting a lot of eggs or meat and that in your diet, you'll probably optimize it, but it's one to keep an eye on as well if you find yourself getting really low energy. But talk to your doctor about that one. And soy, actually, there's lots of positive information around about soy and its impact on PMS as well. So including some soy protein within your diet can be very positive too, even in the way of having some tofu, having some tempeh, even a soy protein shake, adding some 25 grams of it into your day can be positive as well. So I think that's the majority. I think you guys may know a few more that may have some good research, but that would be the primary ones that I would advise to people to take a look at for optimal health and for PMS.
Awesome. Quick one, Jayne. Someone's just asking for clarification on the specific supplement you said you yourself and Emilia was taking. So let me just repeat the name.
It is chaseberry or Vitex, and the Latin name is Agnus castus, I believe is the pronunciation. I'm like, please let me say that right. I was like, can I just call it Vitex? But yeah.
Okay.
As Jayne said with that,
under the 3 names.
As Jayne said with that, it is definitely worth getting online, because whenever I have seen it in stores, or whenever I've had clients who I've advised to take it and they've got it in stores, it's severely underdosed. So definitely, if you can get it online, grab it online and use the recommendation that Jayne just said.
Cool. Awesome. One question that popped into my head that I actually don't know the answer to. So I'm going to learn here, maybe. Was that, Jayne, you mentioned a few supplements there, like with calcium, fish oils, a couple of references to some animal-based food sources to help. Would a vegan be more not necessarily at risk, but experience more issues potentially if their diet wasn't as varied as it needs to be? It may not be as easy for them to get some of those things. Would that be a thing? Does the vegan have potentially more issues if their diet isn't optimized? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider that. Like it would really, that be again very individual, like dependent on the person's diet and how they are optimizing their nutrients. Like a vegan who prioritizes getting a balanced diet, and you can get plenty of calcium from things like nuts and seeds and certain vegetables and that as well. And B vitamins, it can be a little more difficult, but that really is like something that they should get their maybe bloods done, check to see what their levels of iron and vitamin B are like, and then consider supplementation if they're low. But it's really going to depend on the vegan and how much attention they put into their diet and getting the nutrients that they need. But yeah, vitamin B and iron are always going to be a little bit of consideration for vegans to make sure they make a little bit more effort in getting it into their diet. Like they're not eggs and stuff. So
it's something that I deal with a lot. I deal with a lot of vegan clients, and if they're not paying particular attention to their micronutrition, they can run into trouble here. It's the same as I said on the muscle gain talk yesterday. It can be just as healthy as a omnivorous diet, but it just takes more effort and more thought. You can have a thoughtless omnivorous diet and will likely be healthier than a thoughtless vegan or plant-based diet. It requires more thought, more planning, more effort. But if you're willing to put that in, then there's no reason you can't be, equal as far as health or whatever your goal is to someone who's eating everything.
Awesome. Cool. Let's flip over to some live questions. So I'm going to assume we're going to run over here. So hopefully you guys have not got plans to go out and socialize.
Breakfast.
More talk.
So I'm going to say is that I think there are a lot of questions going to come in with maybe some very specific things. So I'll probably kind of upfront say before these guys have to provide clarification that without necessarily all the information about an individual, maybe not going to be able to give a really specifics, but we can talk generally and where possible, give as detailed answer as possible. So just caveating the whole thing before we dive into these questions. So clearly from a coach, again, feel free to jump in, whoever wants to take it first. I have a client who has a hormonal implant for contraception, and her periods have been all over the place, twice a month, sometimes nothing for months. And the doctor has said this is fine. How is this impacting on her health, and what are the implications for training performance and recovery?
Jayne, I think next point at you.
Me?
I think so. It was on my screen. It might be different.
We might be in different orders.
When it comes to, like, my opinion on this would be, when it comes to hormonal implants or anyone who's on a contraception, your periods aren't real periods. You're not having a normal cycle. Things aren't working in the same way. So like a lot of the time when you bleed with hormonal contraception, it is more to feel psychologically like you're having a period. It's not actually a normal period. So yeah, there is a difference in how your body is going to respond. That's my experience of any hormonal contraceptions.
I mean, with any contraception, there's going to be a period of time before things normalize. Like you're going from your body's natural hormonal production to a synthetic hormone production, I guess is the best way to say it, or even a controlled hormone production. So it's going to take some time for your body to adjust, and maybe that's why the doctor's saying this is normal. It's probably not normal for it to happen forever, but it probably is normal for the first X amount of time, X amount of cycles before it will normalize again. It's one thing to consider as well with things like the contraceptive pill, which comes in 28-day cycles. If your natural cycle wasn't 28 days initially, or isn't supposed to be 28 days at your current, age and, how your genetics is set it out to be, that 28-day cycle might mean you're not getting that full period, or it's not the length that it should be for you, or you might be even storing it for longer if you were having shorter cycles. So hormonal contraception is always going to make things weird for your body compared to what it normally was. It's very rare that it will match up exactly with how you were going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and also with these, most oral contraceptives tend to be like a mixed pill, so estrogen and progestin. But what happens when you do that is that they produce a high level of estrogen, so you still get it. But what happens is, obviously, like Jayne said, these are exogenous hormones. They're not it dampens your response of your endogenous hormones, so your own production of hormones, and it stops your ovulation from occurring. So in terms of like how it will impact, because I know that question was quite specific, which is why I think we all just kind of sat for a minute. The question was quite specific on training performance and recovery. So you do still get, like we were talking about at the beginning, estrogen is supportive of muscle growth, muscle development, strength, etc. So you still get that, but it's just not your endogenous estrogen production. And actually, if you look at the impacts, because I know there was a question earlier, so it kind of ties into this in terms of, do you still get these fluctuations in strength, basal metabolic rate, hunger, etc. when you're on the contraceptive pill? Again, if you look at the research, quite like a lot of the other stuff that we've spoken about today, it's so person specific. There's some evidence to suggest that actually the contraceptive pill stops these fluctuations, but then there's also some evidence that suggests that actually you still get these fluctuations if you're taking the contraception in the way that it's supposed to be taken. So again, you kind of just have to treat it on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, you got to remember as well that the raise in temperature isn't just because of the estrogen and progesterone. It's everything that comes with it, including luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. And by taking the pill where it's not covering all of these, it generally just covers estrogen and progesterone. You might not get some of the symptoms you would have naturally had, which is a pretty good indication that you're not having a natural cycle for you.
Cool. Okay, next question coming in, PCOS related. So we touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of, there was a question, I think, related to PCOS. So I have PCOS, not me personally, I'm just reading it out. I've been put on a pill. Okay, so I guess the first question is not very specific in terms of what it is, by a doctor, which has stopped my periods completely. I am a small, lean woman, so how do I know if I have amenorrhea or it's just a result of the pill? Maybe one.
You don't. You don't. The thing is with PCOS as well is that you will have it's unlikely that you'll have regular periods with PCOS. So you don't know, but in your case, if you have PCOS anyway, like I said earlier, PCOS and amenorrhea can often be misdiagnosed. So you kind of have to look at what the pill is doing for you and whether it's the positives, the pros outweigh the cons. But what happens with the oral contraceptive is that it masks the presence of amenorrhea, like they all do. So there's no way of really, you don't. If anyone wants to add to that.
Cool. Yeah, I would say you don't unless you come off it, like, and test the water down and see if there's a shift. Like, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you got to remember that amenorrhea is to do with some of the hormones not being, coming through at the right time or the right amounts. And by taking the pill, you're giving your body those right amounts, whether you would have produced them or not. So, yeah, you are masking it and making it look normal, even if it's not. As for why it's happening in this specific case, I'd say it's probably more due to the PCOS than it is to do with the pill. Like the pill's probably just leveled some stuff out.
Mm-hmm. It would really depend on what her period was like prior to going on the pill as well, and the reasons that the doctor put her specifically on that pill to support her condition. It is a lot more to that.
Yeah, there's more than one type of pill.
Cool. So we're getting lots of questions about the pill. and other different things. So I'm gonna some of the questions that people are asking, we're kind of covering in other questions. So I might not get to your specific question if I think we've covered it already. So I'll try and pick through the ones that are adding something new to the conversation. So Helen's pressed the button to get her name on the thing. So Helen is asking a specific question. Is there an impact on being on the pill long term, especially if it means that you don't have a period? So long-term use of the pill, is that anything to be concerned about?
This is quite a medical question, really. Hi, Helen, by the way. Hi, Helen. Hi. Realistically, if there were actual medical implications from being on the pill long-term, then they wouldn't be available long-term. That's my advice on that. I'm very mindful of crossing that border into medical and clinical advice on this one, because again within this space it can be quite hyped up. The pill and in general, and periods seems to be a really hot topic of conversation, and I think that people often overplay things, and actually sometimes we just have to look back straight at the medical evidence and the clinical research that we've got, and if it is available, then I'm inclined to err on the side of agreeing with clinical research. I don't know about everyone else.
Okay. I mean,
I agree with that.
We're talking about, the stuff we talked about already is based on having certain types of hormones in certain amounts at certain times, and the pill is kind of replicating that. So I would say you don't have a period, but you are still getting the hormones as if you were producing the period, just artificially. So, I mean, I don't know if there's any long-term effects. I would say anecdotally, I've noticed a lot of older women, and when I say older, I don't mean like actually old. I mean probably anything from like.
Very carefully, Nick.
Yeah.
Cover my ears here.
They're not actually old, but their age of pill taking age. Let's use that. The contraceptive age is getting on there. Anyway, let's say from like 30-ish, depending on how long they've been taking the pill, I see that a lot of women stop taking the pill. I don't know if that is personal preference. Maybe they're noticing side effects that they're not liking, or if it's doctor's advice. But I just notice, as someone who trains a lot of women, and this is something that comes up a lot, is that generally once they get, from about 30, because they've been taking the pill for, 15 plus years, they've gone off it for whatever reason. So there might be something in it. It's worth asking your doctor.
Very individual again.
And for men and women, Nick, 30 is not old. If it is, then
contraceptive age is what I meant.
So, anyway, right. Okay, so I'm going to come to Emilia for this one because you have personal experience of this. So what's your opinion on women doing competition cut prep for a fitness show? So for those who don't know, Emilia has done said competition prep. So I'm not sure what opinion about what aspect of it this person's asking, but I guess in general, in terms of related to menstrual cycles and potential loss of menstrual cycle, I guess, as you get further into competition prep, what's your kind of thought process on this whole topic?
Okay, so yes, I competed for about 4 years, and I finished 3 years ago. I stopped competing, so I have personal experience. I also prep a couple of clients every year to compete, so that will give you a bit of an indication in terms of my opinion on it. I think that often bodybuilding and competing is demonized for the potential impacts in terms of people's health and relationships with food, but unfortunately it's a sport, and this increase in HA that occurs with dieting happens with competitive bodybuilding, but it also happens with other elite sport. It's not just bodybuilding, and we often don't demonize long distance runners and that sport for resulting in HA because they're doing a performance sport, when actually we will very much be quick to demonize competing. That being said, I do have an issue with poor preparation and poor coaching around competing. And I think that's a lot of where the issue lies, in that there are prep coaches, and I'm calling people prep coaches, who predominantly focus on competing and bodybuilding, who value competing and value performance over everything else, especially health, and health often takes a back seat. And at some point with competing, no matter, even if it's me who's prepping someone for a short term, health is secondary, at least for a very short point of a very short duration of that period. And so I'm not against it, but competing does increase your risk of losing your period. It does increase your risk of having disordered eating habits. It does increase your preoccupation with food, and it does increase your body dissatisfaction. But that is dieting on the whole. It's not specific to competing. And what's really important after competing is, if you are someone who does lose your period from competing, is that you make a very, very clear and concerted effort after competing to focus on regaining your cycle, and also working specifically on your relationship with food. So again, potentially removing tracking and focusing on your internal cues again. So it's very specific in terms of how you do it. And whenever someone asks me about if I'll prep them, I will always say, well, what do you value more at this point? Do you value winning above all else? Because if you do, then you should go to a competition prep person who does that, because that's not what I do. But ultimately, yes, competing is not a healthy sport, but a lot of sports are not healthy.
Cool. Awesome.
I think one thing to add there to mitigate these negative health effects is to give yourself enough time. There's so often where people are like, men and women are like, oh, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. I'm 12 weeks out. Here's day one. And I'm like, that's not enough time. Like, that is where women get into trouble with this sort of thing, because they give themselves not enough time. They have to drop calories too drastically to try and drop the fat quick enough. And then they do get this amenorrhea. By giving yourself enough time, and I'm talking like, 20 plus weeks is probably like where you'd want to be to do it in a really healthy way. And that would include a lot of diet breaks and other ways to mitigate the amenorrhea and the other psychological side effects and the preoccupation with food and stuff like that, is to give yourself enough time. If you are considering competing, don't book a show 12 weeks out. Look 6 months out even. Like, give yourself plenty of time, because things will happen and you need time to be able to correct anything that goes wrong, and do it in a way that doesn't sacrifice your health or your goals.
Cool. I actually want to touch on that as well. It's like a bit about what both the guys have said. And it's like the fact that it is fitness shows that are primarily what's spoken about when it comes to this. But in my experience, people who've reached out to me most about period loss and trying to understand it have been Olympic lifters, powerlifters, all trying to make weight, and it being normalized within the industry that this can happen to these young women who are trying to make weight for competitions, cutting probably too fast on the lead up to a competition, and they don't particularly want to hear what you have to tell them in relation to how they're going to need to get their period back. And and this is something that people should be really aware of, is going to a coach that will, as Nick said, give them the lead-in time to take care of them, that it's not normal and it's not okay to lose your period for your sport and for it to happen continuously. And it just seems to be accepted by certain coaches in several sports and not just in prep for fitness shows. And I think that's something that people should be really aware of. And young women in any sport, it shouldn't be normalized for them to lose their period just to compete and to make any kind of platform.
I mean, if you're competing in a weight-specific sport, so where you have to make a weight class, unless you're competing at like top level, and we're talking like, for the UK or, internationally, you shouldn't be putting your health at risk to try and make a weight class. Like, you can handle a local competition at Fred's gym in the weight class above where you would ideally like to be. Like, you can handle that. You're just doing it to get experience at that stage. Like, when you're looking at, UK nationals or something like that, then yeah, maybe then you need to start looking at actually dieting to try and hit a weight class. But dieting for a weight class is detrimental to performance anyway. And your goal, as in all these weight specific sports or weight class sports, is performance. So you're not only are you putting your health at risk, but you're putting your performance in that sport at risk. And so again, unless you're at a level where you're competing at a really high level, and by then you probably sorted your weight class anyway, I wouldn't advise to anybody in any sport cutting weight just to compete in a different weight class.
Yeah, what's really interesting actually, Nick, is on that is that I used to work in elite sport before I went into lecturing, and I spoke a lot with, these are GB athletes who potentially would make weight, and there was some research even in the elite athletes that suggested that those who made weight, their performance was hindered relative to those who didn't cut weight at all. So even if you are at the top end of that, making weight tends to be detrimental to performance.
Oh yeah, it's definitely detrimental regardless of what level you're at. I just mean that, like, if you're going for, you know, a UK title or a world record or something, and being in the wrong, like, a weight class above means you wouldn't perform as well or wouldn't make a team or something like that, then maybe some health risks or some risks to your performance are worth it to you. But at a lower level, like, it's just pride on the line. And if you're putting your pride above your own health, then there's probably other issues at play.
It's an interesting one, because I've actually had a client in the past who was competing at Australian nationals for powerlifting. And when she came to me, it was, I asked her a few questions about basic lifestyle and things like that. And it turned out, you know, she hadn't had a period for a long, long time, but she just didn't think anything of it. Just, it was almost like she'd been with coaches before on a nutrition side, is that health was irrelevant. And this was literally just about what number came back on that scale. And that was the only thing that mattered. And that's just, it was almost like a brute force and ignorance approach to her weight making. And it was just so surprising that someone who is at quite a high level in a sport, who she actually went on to break a world record, you know, not just to brag, but I didn't break the record, but a little bit. It just, at that level, just brute force and ignorance was the approach from the coaches, let alone the person who was, you know, didn't have the knowledge or didn't have the understanding. It was just following guidance. So I think there's lots of things to think about in lots of different sports that have a weight making element to them. Cool. Let's move on. Next question. I'm going to go to you, Nick, because you kind of answered a question about coaching and protocols and things like that. This is kind of relating to how you might start to approach measurements, pictures, and things like that. So do you, with someone who's maybe having some changes and being influenced by menstrual cycle and things like that, do you look at things more on a month-to-month basis, i.e. comparing week 1 of March to week 1 of April type of thing? Or are you still looking at it very much a week-to-week, day-to-day type of thing?
Both. I think looking at month-to-month is super handy for things like scale weight and even taking pictures, because if you just look at it day-to-day, you are going to get those fluctuations that we've already spoken about, and people are going to get disheartened by the scale going up when they're doing all the work for it to go down. And, you know, scale weight can lead to some bad relationships and like bad body image stuff. And like, it's something that I like to stay away from whenever possible. But it is a good data point, especially if you're coaching remotely, which a lot of people are now. So scale weight can be important, but I think as soon as you can remove it from the equation, it's smart to remove it from the equation. I like to get a lot of data up front. And then once we see like, let's do scale weight, for example, once we see that like peak that they have in a certain part of their cycle, because I'm always getting women to track the cycle as well. Once we see that peak in weight and that little bit of a rise, I just don't get them to weigh on those days. Maybe I'll do it once every couple of months, but the weight of, you know, 1 week out of the 4 weeks of that month, if it's trending down on average for the rest of those weeks, is irrelevant. And it can just be psychologically helpful for some people not to see the weight go up those days. I do the same thing when people have diet breaks or refeeds. I just don't get them to weigh for the next couple of days, because psychologically it's not worth them freaking out and then, you know, either giving in and eating a whole bunch more, or, you know, stopping their refeed early and, you know, getting rid of the physiological impact which I was trying to give them. So as far as weight, yeah, definitely zooming out and looking at month to month, but just looking at averages in general. Like I rarely ever go, oh, this day to this day, even if it is a month, it'll be like this week to this week, like you said, Simon. And you can see once you start zooming out, I don't know why I do this to zoom out. I guess I've used iPhones too long. But once you zoom out, you can start seeing the average over time changing, and that is what is actually important, not what is happening on a day-to-day level or a week-to-week level or even a month-to-month level. Like if, a year away from now, if you've made progress, then that's what matters, not what happened, in 1 month or 1 week or 1 day. And that's the same for training. That's the same for pitches. That's the same for any data point you're going to track. As long as you're making progress over time, the period of time doesn't really matter unless you have a deadline.
Got it. Cool. Nick, this next question is for you and me. So as a male coach, what is the best way to introduce tracking of the cycle to your female clients' check-ins in a seamless manner? And I guess my view on this is it probably starts way before you even coach that client, because I think that you've got to establish a relationship of trust and honesty and communication. If you've got that, then I think conversations about any aspect of that person's health and fitness become more easier for both parties. So if you have a very honest and open relationship with your clients and and vice versa with your coach, that becomes a very easy conversation. So personally, I've never had an issue with raising it as a topic for something that we need to look at or need to understand. I've never had an issue in educating a client about that sort of thing, because I feel that I'm very considered about who I take on as a client and making sure that I feel I can work with that person well. So for me, my personal point of view is that it comes before you even get started. It shouldn't be that you have a challenge in making that a seamless thing, because all of that communication and openness and honesty has been worked on up front. But I'll let you add in.
Yeah, like it's very much that. It's very much rapport building. But even for me, I don't even think about it. Like I've never ever considered that, because it's so normal for me to ask, what day of your cycle are you on? And that will open up, whether they're on contraception. Like that is a very closed question, but it brings back a lot of different answers. So they might just say, yeah, I'm on day 12, and that's it. So then I can be pretty sure that they're at least tracking their cycle, which is, as I said earlier, is super important. It's a very good data point to have. And making that normal from the get-go, before I've even met them in my pre-consultation form, what day of your cycle you're on. If they say they don't know, then I can bring it up. Like it's part of a normal part of working with me. It's part of the data that I require. And I know if someone didn't want to give me that information, I probably wouldn't work with them. It shouldn't be an awkward topic. It doesn't matter whether you're a guy or a girl. Talking about this stuff, especially in this industry, should be normalized. If you don't need to go into the nitty-gritty, details of it. What's important for you to know, you should already ask. And if they want to tell you more and they think is relevant, they will come to that on their own terms. Like you don't need to know the viscosity or something like that. If they want to tell you the viscosity, then go nuts. Maybe there's something there for you to use, but it's pretty unlikely.
You don't use like car engine oil measurements, do you, Nick, or anything like that for the viscosity?
I mean, I've never had someone say it is, a numerical value of viscosity. They just kind of give like it's pretty thick, or, but again, it's kind of up to them. Like some of my clients that I work with are very open about it. Some people are like, oh, time of the month, but however they want to talk about it is up to them. But the data that I need is still really clear. Like I just need to know what day of your cycle you're on, and have you noticed any changes? Like that's it. It's not a hard thing to bring up.
Yeah, I think from my point of view as well, that individual element is important. So one of my clients, she labels it Danger Week as her thing.
One of my clients, we call it Shark Week.
So she's labeled it herself Danger Week, and then and that's kind of her way for her, although it's quite jokey. It completely has taken away any of the fear that she had around when she first started, very much sort of stuck in terms of scale weight, that being the only measure of progress. Mm-hmm. And now she's like, well, Danger Week's coming up. We have an increase of calories. That's all planned. She's prepared for it. She works within a broad range. If she's a little bit hungry one day, she knows she can have the flexibility to move around. And she's just much more relaxed about that process. And it's almost like, yep, Danger Week, I brush it off. We know what we've got to do. We move on. I've got my flexibility. I can kind of move around with calories. I don't really care what happens with the scale weight. So again, it's kind of how you approach it with the individual and individual circumstances, I think makes a difference. Mm-hmm. Cool. Hopefully we got that right, Nick.
No, they haven't said anything. They just laughed at me. So I don't know if
no daggers or Emilia. So we're all right. We'll go to the ladies, and you can take this next one. Lind, I don't. Lind, you're gonna have to tell me. Do you pronounce the D? I don't know. Lind. I'm going to go for it. I'm thinking like lint, as in the chocolate. That's the T at the end. So, would love to have any advice out there for mature ladies. I'm assuming this is going to be like a menopause-related question, and how potentially that affects weight loss and that type of thing. So, Jayne, Emilia, I'll give you the floor. Whoever wants to put their hand up and go first.
Probably both say very similar things anyway, right, Jayne?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just tag team it. So yeah, what tends to happen during menopause is that it does tend to favour fat gain. And if we look at it in terms of numbers, there's an average of about 3 or 4 kilograms of fat gain over 6 years. If you're looking at menopause, sort of pre and post menopause, the average weight gain roughly is about 3 kilograms of fat mass. And what happens as you get older, regardless of menopause or not, is that your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, does reduce over time. So the older we get, our BMR does slightly reduce. But what also happens during menopause is that you get this bottoming out of estrogen levels to the point where estrogen levels tend to be similar to males after menopause. So what happens as a result of this reduction in estrogen is that we get a slight redistribution of body fat. So whereas when you are premenopausal, so when you're slightly younger, as a woman, we tend to store more fat around our legs and our bum. We get a shift in where we store fat. So actually during the menopause, the fat redistributes and moves towards more our stomach region. So actually what can happen is that you may think that you're gaining body fat during the menopause or around this time, but you might not actually be gaining body fat. It might just be that you've actually got a shift in where you're storing your body fat, and that can play games a little bit with your mind in the sense of you might think, if you're somebody who's dieting, for example, you might actually think, I'm not losing any body fat because my stomach just looks like it's getting fatter, or you judge everything by your midsection, but you will get this redistribution of fat during this time. At the same time, there's a rapid decline in muscle mass at this time because of this drop in estrogen and other factors. So your muscle mass tends to reduce, especially if you're not doing any weight training or resistance training specifically, but you will get this reduction in muscle mass. Alongside this, you'll have an increase in appetite because of this reduction in estrogen. You may find that your sleep is impacted. As a result of your sleep being impacted, you are subsequently hungrier again. But alongside that, because you are more tired, you might find a reduction in your NEAT. So your activity outside of exercise might reduce, and your desire to train might reduce, your intensity might reduce because you're tired. And all of these things combine together to make fat loss more difficult, to make body composition changes slightly more difficult, and to impact how you actually see your body composition in terms of this shift in where you store your body fat. So it can be a challenging time, but there are certain things that you can do to minimize it. And I'm going to let Jayne or Nick come in here so that I'm not just talking.
It is like that, yeah. Like it's about managing your expectations of yourself around that time and understanding the changes that are happening in your body. As Emilia said, like your muscle mass declines, redistribution of body fat, and understanding that's going to be hugely empowering for people moving through it. It is important then to kind of realize that your energy needs are going to lower. So you're going to have to consider what you eat to satiate you is going to be really important. You're going to be hungry. So consider adding more volume foods. Try and prioritize things like your leafy greens, your vegetables, things like that are going to fill you up. And with the issues with your muscle decline, prioritizing protein is going to be really important at this time too. It's already important, but an increase in protein would be prudent alongside trying to introduce some resistance training to help support that side of things as well. Also, like there are certain supplements that may potentially help, like things that we kind of talked about earlier, even with PMS, like your omega-3, vitamin D can be really worth considering. Soy again has some positive research in being helpful in its impact on hormone levels and that as well. Chasteberry again has some positive influence for certain people who are going through perimenopause and menopause as well. As well as that, I would suggest probably, I think black cohosh, Emilia might know a little bit more about that, but I have read some research that can sometimes have a positive influence on people at that stage as well. But it really is about managing your expectations, understanding that your energy needs are going to come down, trying to introduce some resistance training and protein, increase that, and really, really focusing on creating more balance and like a more balanced, healthy diet, increasing vegetable intake, legumes, fibrous foods that are going to fill you up and satisfy you. It's really unfortunate that, you know, energy needs drop as hunger increases. So it's a difficult time that involves a lot of kindness to yourself, I think, is really important too.
I think one thing is well to consider is that once you are postmenopausal, you no longer have your menstrual cycle, and most of the stuff we've spoken about up until now doesn't really apply anymore. You don't have those cycling hormones. You kind of just level all the time. So that may or may not be a good thing to you. But the stuff that we've spoken about, like the changes in times when you would be better to eat more calories, eat less calories, train more, train less, won't apply anymore. But I agree with everything everyone else has said.
Cool. Creatine as well. I can't believe I forgot that. Creatine. It's always awesome. How did I forget that? I talk about it so often. But like creatine can be a good consideration around that time as well.
Cool.
Worth looking into.
Awesome. Just one for us, Nick. We did well. So the male answers were good. We're doing all right. And Emilia, next question is specifically addressed to you, which is, it seems to be a very key question, which is, how does the menstrual cycle affect how many triangles of large Toblerone you can fit in your mouth at once?
I'm getting mocked for this a lot on everything that I'm talking on recently. I'm going to go with, I think luteal phase increases it by 100%. Go for 2. Because normally, I think one triangle of Toblerone is pretty impressive in your mouth at once, but maybe 2 in luteal. I'm
glad you said triangle. I thought you meant the whole bar.
That would be a skill, and I wouldn't be making a lot of money somewhere else.
Is it wrong that I really want to test this out now? I'm like, I need a Toblerone immediately.
Cool. Right, couple more questions coming in. So let's kind of throw these up. I'm going to let someone tackle this question. I need a little gentleman's break, so I'm going to disappear for 10 seconds while you, well, not 10 seconds, a bit longer. So many of my clients are unsure about where they are in the time of the month due to irregularity. How would you track if they don't have periods or clear periods and signs? I'll leave that to the floor.
Yeah, so I would just refer back to what we all have spoken about earlier on, in the sense of I would recommend my clients use an app, but if they don't want to, cost-wise or other, then literally just logging symptoms for themselves each day in their diaries. Mm-hmm. But looking at, bleeding is not the only kind of thing that you want to be looking at. You want to be looking at mood, you want to look at appetite, sleep, And the apps that I was recommending, and I know that some people missed it and asked again, so I was talking about natural cycles, but there's also Clue and something else. They actually look at your core temperature as well. So you take your temperature in the morning. And so actually when periods are irregular, now is a better time than any almost to track these signs and symptoms. And a lot of, well, not a lot of my clients, but some of my clients have come to me to regain their periods with HA. And so that's one of the things that we first start with, is looking at these types of factors. And again, their strength in the gym, they'll log this so that if they see a cycle where potentially their strength is reduced, that might indicate some part of their menstrual cycle. So you just track it like everything else, but it's important to just look at all the potential factors that are worth tracking, not just, like I said, period related. Don't know if you guys have got anything on that.
I mean, I think it might be worth noting for anyone who doesn't track it already, is that the start of your period is day 1. So just start counting from your next period, see when your next one happens, and start building that data from now. Like if you haven't counted it before, it's super important to know, start counting it.
Exactly. Find the patterns throughout it. See if there's any, like, throughout the patterns that you're looking at, like, see what influences it, what changes it. Is there anything that you're doing within your lifestyle, training, whatever, that seems to impact it? You can learn so much just by tracking it, irrelevant if it's irregular or not.
Should I mute myself? You're not going to hear me, are you? Cool. Let's move on to the next question then. Another pill-related question. Let's cover that one, if we can. I haven't pre-read this one, so God knows what it says. When you stop taking the pill, what changes take place in your body? Does this mean you get more testosterone and thus can become more masculine? What does this mean for the progesterone and estrogen levels? They increase or decrease? Does it mean less mood swings and so less emotional eating? Or is this very person specific? Quite a long question there. And also, it's covered Jayne's face.
It's very a good thing that I look at it.
It is very person specific. So the last sentence there, yeah, it is very person specific. But as we've kind of already covered, you're getting synthetic hormones from contraception. So when you stop the contraception, your natural hormones will have been diminished quite a bit, and so they will increase. So your estrogen and progesterone will increase. Will they increase fast enough for you to start getting back to regular cycles? Probably not. But again, that's going to be super individual.
Okay, cool. Right. Let me see if I think that's my dad.
It's not my dad.
The technology to figure out how to put his name on there. So there you go. He's a 70-year-old man. So fair play. He even got on Facebook, let alone.
And he used emojis.
Yeah. There you go. I've done that one. Okay. Lots of questions about like period loss, which I think obviously we'll kind of tackle as many as we can. But I guess there's a general feeling as, you know, people should be looking into this. If you're having a coach and this is happening, you know, maybe ask some questions. If you haven't had a coach, maybe you should be seeing a doctor or getting some advice, because, you know, just leaving it and just kind of treating it as something you don't need to focus on should be not should be the thing. I haven't had a period for a year, but I might think might be going through the menopause. I haven't had any symptoms. I eat well and train 4 or 5 days a week. Can I still build muscle? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, you can still build muscle, but if you are perimenopausal, it is more difficult. So the best thing to do is, you say that you eat well and train 4 to 5 times days a week, which is great. What I would really just say is that yes, you can, and don't go into it thinking that it's a waste of time. That's really important. But look at your, when you say you eat well, look at, like, Jayne's covered such really good range of food sources and things throughout this. I'm just sitting in awe of all of her food knowledge. But she's talked a lot about this, but look at your protein intake specifically, look at your protein quality. If you, obviously I can't tell from this question, but if you are vegetarian or vegan, make sure that you're focusing on complete proteins. This is more important for you right now than even maybe 10 years ago. So make sure that you're getting complete proteins. sufficient protein, and also that you are the intricacies of protein intake become a little bit more important for you now. So actually making sure that you're having 3 to 5 servings of protein each day. I don't know what your body weight is, but let's aim for roughly 30 grams of protein at each meal. And making sure that you have, when you wake up in the morning before you go to bed, these kind of more intricate things that are important for muscle building, but they're not necessarily essential, become more important for you now. And also on the training side of things, really trying to focus on what Nick was saying earlier about progressive overload is really important. So when you're training, make sure that it is resistance training and that you are logging it in some way. You don't need to have a pen and paper, but even just keeping a log of it on your phone is helpful, and aiming to progress either your weight or your reps over time and kind of in a cumulative way. And if you're doing those things, then you're doing the best that you can to support yourself in maintaining and building muscle.
And there was another question somewhere further up, so apologies that I've kind of lost what the question was in the massive stuff. But when you were talking about specifically around the competing side of things and reintroduction of calories and having a concerted effort to reintroduce calories and so on and so forth, someone asked a specific question: is when you're going through that reintroduction process, is it literally just more calories, or is there a specific way you should maybe introduce more of a certain macronutrient versus another? Or is it just literally just more calories in general that's the key thing?
Yeah, so more calories is the most important thing. What you'll probably find is that protein intake is already quite high when you finish a competition prep or an extreme diet, and actually you might be able to bring that down a little bit and then bring in more calories from carbs and fat. And I don't tend to provide carbohydrate and fat targets for my clients on the whole, but if it's somebody who is post-competing or somebody who is potentially trying to regain their period, yes, you want to look at fat intake predominantly, and ideally if you can fit it into your calories post-show, you're looking at a minimum of about 50 grams of fat. At least that's what I would recommend with my clients, and then more than that is fine, but then the rest can come from carbohydrate, just because what happens generally with competing and these extreme diets is that fat tends to be the first nutrient to go. And so if people have been dieting, like Nick said, for a long time, which they should have been doing to compete, they will have been chronically low on the fat intake. And even when you implement things like refeeds and diet breaks, often the predominant macronutrient to increase there is carbohydrate. So increasing fat intake is important post-show, but calories is also really important. But I do want to make a kind of side note from that, in that some people might find actually for their relationship with food, which is often compromised after this, that actually going to a more intuitive way of eating immediately post-show can actually be really helpful. So it is very individual, in which case the person wouldn't necessarily be tracking, say, grams of fat, but they might actually focus on having a serving of unsaturated fat with each meal, for example. That would be another way to do it. So it's very specific on the person and what their relationship with food is like after they compete.
We at Flex Success, we have a mandatory post-show period where they have to maintain their coaching with their coach to ensure that there is some structured way back to, a healthier physique and a healthier lifestyle. Because, a lot of prep coaches will just get to the show and then that's it. They dump them. They move on to the next person because, they're not showing before and after pictures or stage pictures of people once they've gained some weight back. And you got to remember that post-show, the goal is to gain some weight back, because staying at that level of leanness, especially if you're a female and you are dealing with issues around energy availability, is super bad for your health. So it's a part of a mindset, and it's part of something you need to consider before you even start prepping for the show is what are you going to do after? And I would always recommend remaining with your coach, or even finding another coach who maybe specializes in that sort of thing, instead of just going off on your own straight after a show, because a lot of people do have a worse relationship with food compared to when they started, and they tend to, this is where you start getting into binge restrict cycles, because people just go nuts after their show and then they're like, oh shit, I don't want to gain heaps of fat. and then they start to restrict again, and then they just keep doing that, and then all of a sudden they've got an eating disorder.
Cool. Got it. Important question. Simon, did I wash my hands for 20 seconds there? Yeah, I did. Definitely. I was timing it. Definitely. Interesting question. Any of you guys got any further reading suggestions around this particular topic for Andrew and anyone else who's interested in maybe learning a little bit more from some credible sources?
The source that he's put there is really good anyway.
I enjoyed Stacey Sims' Roar for female training, and thought it was an interesting read and a good book. She puts out some interesting stuff around female training throughout their cycle and nutrition and that as well.
What was the name of that again?
It's Roar by Dr. Stacey Sims.
It's Dr. Stacey Sims. There you go.
Also, No Period Now What by Nicola Rinaldi. She has a book on restoring your period after HA.
Okay, cool, awesome. Someone coming in with a Toblerone comment. There you go. Cool. So there's a question about the app. Yes, Natural Cycles, I think was the one we mentioned. Okay, another question coming in. Sorry, late to the session. I'm 50, got into resistance training in November 2017, trade forward 5 times a week. You were talking about creatine is something that is beneficial. Can you explain the benefits? Why is it so good? Maybe Jayne, you can take up that one.
Creatine is always beneficial for if you're prioritizing muscle gain. It's a fantastic supplement. It promotes the uptake of water inside our muscles, inside the cells, which helps us with training adaptations and also helps with recovery. And so if you're going to take creatine, if you're doing a lot of resistance training, it is going to help you to build and sustain muscle, and it's going to help you as well to recover a little bit better, which helps when you're going to go back to training again. So creatine is positive for anyone who's promoting muscle gain. So it's even more beneficial for somebody who is moving into 50 years of age and that who may be a little bit concerned about muscle loss.
I mean, if you're 50 years old, which is not old, just so everyone's aware, you're starting to get to the point where you're maybe, let's say, 10 or 15 years away from potential cognitive decline. And there's some research at the moment showing that creatine can dampen the effects of cognitive decline. That would be a weird thing. Dampen the effects of cognitive decline. But to expand on what Jayne was saying, the way that it works is for performance especially, is that creatine is stored in the muscles as creatine phosphate. ATP, which is our primary energy source when we're doing any power or speed or even some strength-based work, so that's our primary fuel source. And that is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And when it needs to replenish, it can get the phosphate from the creatine phosphate. So you're giving another building block of that next form of quick burst energy is right there ready to go when you're taking creatine, where it would take longer to replenish that if you weren't taking creatine. So just to go more sciencey on what Jayne was saying.
So I'm not laughing at you, Nick. I'm just laughing at a comment that just came in. I like to lie back on my cognitive recliner. A couple of questions coming in, I think from people who may or may not have caught some of the things that we were talking about right at the beginning. So I think, Emilia, you mentioned a course, I think you mentioned around something. The
mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I think that was the thing that came in a bit question. It's really, really well known. It's John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the kind of founders he's the founder of that program, but it's the main mindfulness-based program that's used in research, and it's now used in stress management, in pain management, and various other things.
Awesome. Cool. Quick question on creatine again. So Jayne, come back. You're a creatine girl this morning. So what is the best time pre-post training and for taking it? I assume, what's the best way to take it in general?
Marginal benefits to taking it post-training, but honestly, it really isn't a massive difference. So it's whenever you can remember to take it and take it consistently every single day, irrelevant if you're training or not training, you can take creatine every day. So I'd say marginal benefits to taking a post-training, and take it however you enjoy it. If you want to store it separately and then pop it into a shake after training, or like I would just pop it into my mouth and wash it down with water. I know.
Hey, that's what I do.
See, it's kind of got used to doing it that way. But yeah, marginal benefits to post. But if you have issues remembering to take it, which some people do, or they don't carry it with them, then it really is just take it whenever you will remember to consistently take it every day. Take it with your other supplements if that's easier for you. Just get it into you. That would be my creatine recommendations.
There's some sound bites like that, Jayne. Just get it into you is I tell you what we use.
Just put it in your mouth and then
wash it down. So here we go. So Emilia, I think this may be sort of something that's going to link into your later talk, and it's covering your face. So I'll just read it out and then move on. So enjoy. There you go. Enjoy the talk. With the majority of people in lockdown and my current exercise output being severely lower than I would like, I've introduced a lower calorie intake. However, eating more filler foods like vegetables, I'm finding myself being hungry sooner. How should I consider being satisfied to feeling full? Does that even make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. That was a nice question, actually, whoever wrote that. Yeah, so in terms of if you're trying to manage your body composition, then slightly reducing your intake now to match your potential reduced expenditure is a good idea. What will happen is obviously you are going to get hungrier because you are eating fewer calories. You may have done it, you may have reduced it so much that actually you've put yourself into a slight deficit, and that's why you're hungrier. And really look at whether actually the first thing to do is whether that you need to reduce it to that extent, because your expenditure might not have actually dropped as much as you think it has, and you've put yourself into quite potentially a strong deficit. But you did the right thing in terms of increasing your food volume. But also what is going to impact your satiety is actually your food satisfaction. So look at what your meals are consisting of alongside food volume. So are they satisfying in terms of taste? Do they have maybe an essential fat component? Because I imagine what you've done is what we were just speaking about earlier, is that you've probably gone, I know how to reduce my calories, I'm going to take some fat out of my diet because it's the easiest place to remove them. But often what can happen when you reduce fat is that you become less satisfied, because fat actually slows the gastric emptying rate, so it slows the release of food from your stomach. So if you've removed a high proportion of your fat from your diet, what that might have meant that actually you are less satisfied, even though you've got a bigger stomach volume with all the extra vegetables that you're eating. So potentially look at that. So look at if you're getting satisfied from your meals from a volume standpoint, from a enjoyment standpoint, and also from look at your essential fat intake or your fat intake overall. And also ensure that you are having your meals very mindfully. So ensure that you're taking your time with them and actually sitting down with them, being present, enjoying them. That will impact your hunger later on. But what I would also say is what's happened at the same time and kind of coincided with you reducing your calorie intake is that you've probably shifted to working at home, you are in a new environment, you potentially are slightly more stressed, and all of these kind of internal feelings may well be manifesting as hunger, but actually, and you're kind of, you're attributing it to hunger because you've reduced your calorie intake. Actually, it may well be that it's not hunger and you're bored, but you're calling it hunger because you want to go and snack. So actually, from the other side of things, in terms of your mindset, think about calling those feelings out and actually identifying, is this hunger? So do I feel it in my stomach? Do I have a lack of energy? Is my tummy rumbling? Or is this kind of more an emotional thing? Am I bored, or am I anxious about things going on at the moment? Or am I so stressed at my partner that I'm just eating so that I don't knock him out again? So kind of look at it from both sides, I think, on that front.
Yeah. Don't hit us males as well. We're nice. Oh, maybe not most of us. I don't know.
Could be female
sleep as well. Sleep would be massively impactful on your appetite too. Like as Emilia was saying, with stress and the impact of that underlying at the moment, if that impacts your sleep too, if you're not getting sufficient sleep at this time, it's going to make you feel hungrier.
I think as well, something that I found worked with a bunch of my clients, because they are at home all day and have constant access to food, and work is less structured because, you know, nobody's watching them sit at their computer or not get up or whatever. Some of them implemented like a food schedule, like so they eat X amount of hours apart. So they might start feeling hungry, but then they can be like, oh, I've only got an hour to my next meal. I can tough this out. Whereas if they didn't have that structure in place, they might just be like, oh, okay, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat right now. And then that just, like, what's the word? That just keeps happening. And then all of a sudden they've eaten more in the day all bunched together. Whereas if they kept it in line with the schedule, they can have a bit more control over it.
Cool. So this question actually links to, so this is from Louise. Well, it's not really a question. Well, it's kind of a question. Does this mean if you're hungry, take a nap? This is something that Gabrielle Fundaro talked about yesterday evening, was that maybe the source of the feeling that you have maybe hints to the solution. So if you actually feel tired, maybe it's not necessarily a food snack that you need, it's a nap or a sleep snack, as she called it, is maybe what you need. And maybe that's being in tune with where that feeling is actually coming from, gives you a hint as to maybe the solution isn't going to be found in 17 donuts. It's going to be in having a bit of a nap. And, you know, so yes, maybe if you're feeling quote unquote hungry and it's not true hunger, then maybe a little nap is the good thing to do.
When I'm in the depths of dieting, even if it is true hunger, I find I can put off my next meal by having a nap. And, you know, by putting it off, end up having less calories throughout the day. You know, it can be a pretty drastic measure, but it depends on, again, what your goal is. Is there a deadline? Is your health at risk? Generally, by putting off a meal by like an hour, your health's probably not at risk. And naps are awesome. So yeah, I recommend exactly that.
There you go. Cool. A lot of love coming in for you guys. I won't be able to bring them all up, but they are loving the talk. And I think we're going to kind of draw it to a close now. I think that we have exhausted all questions. So an hour and 50 minutes, so 50 minutes longer than we had planned, but hopefully lots of packed value for everyone there. So I would say that these guys have obviously given up their time this morning. They're usually in bed. Maybe they're rising about now to make it into the world. But certainly they've given up their time, given you a lot of value, lots of interesting information, useful knowledge, whether you're a coach, whether you're a female, whatever kind of interest you have with health and fitness, lots of information has come your way. So what I would ask you to do is go follow them on Instagram, show them some love, maybe even slide into their DMs and say what you thought of their, what was the biggest takeaway that you had, etc., etc. So Emilia and Nick have got their things here. Yeah. Jayne.
I panicked because I couldn't log on. I had technical difficulties. I was like, oh, who am I? That's who I am.
Jayne. I looked, like, she even went with a comma instead of an apostrophe for her.
Seriously, the first 10 minutes, I was just looking at that going, what's wrong with me?
So you can find them all. There is a thread in the group, the CoFit group. You'll find a thread with all of the coaches' Instagram details, plus a little bit of, they've written a little bio about themselves, about what they do. So these guys don't just talk about periods all the time. They have broader knowledge beyond this. So this is just kind of like a taster of what's in store. If you go and consume their content on Instagram and interact with them, there's lots more information that's going to help you from a health and fitness perspective. So thank you so much, Emilia, Jayne, and Nick, for your time. We will see you all again a little bit later at some point. So have some coffee, caffeinate, hydrate, go for your one allocated walk or whatever it is that you end up doing, and we will speak to you later.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to know anything more about any of the coaches, their details are in the description below. If you have any questions or you'd like to request any of these coaches back on the channel, you can let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like me, please consider subscribing. Until next time, I've been Nick, this has been Nutrition, and I'll see you in the next video.